It's Iowa.
From high school to international wrestling, on the mat and beyond, this is the Potentially Dangerous podcast with the guys from IAwrestle.
If you're a fighter, you like a fight. If you're an American, you like a fight. If you're an Iowa Hawkeye, you know you're going to get a fight.
Subscribe to our podcast on iTunes and all your podcast-friendly apps. And follow us on social media platforms at IAwrestle. Time to strap it up and get to the show.
All right, welcome to Potentially Dangerous. We are live here in studio. We've been bringing you some live shows here. We have had Keith Massey on. We've had Louis Curtis on. Had Ethan Anderson last week with a sit down here in the studio, which was really fun to kind of pick his brain a little bit about some of the mental things that these wrestlers are going through. You know, we're highlighting high-level wrestlers and things that they've had to deal with, and everybody's going through stuff right now. But some positive news is Governor Reynolds maybe said that we are going to be playing softball here this summer. Hopefully we'll have some news here. Actually on the show, we got Cody Goodwin with the Des Moines Register. He's well connected with the Athletic Association, so hopefully he will be dropping some news. But we're talking a little bit of wrestling, kind of a little bit about, you know, his job, how he got involved. You know, you've seen his coverage on the Des Moines Register. Does it all by himself. I mean, maybe he has some people helping him, but you know, here at IAwrestle, we got a handful of people. Cody's out there grinding it by himself most of the time. So kudos to what he does and you do to be able to do that, because I know how much it takes for us to kind of get the balls rolling, get these stories. So hopefully we'll get some breaking news from you here today. But thanks for being on the show.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me. I've been enjoying we were talking about this a little bit before we went live, but like the various things that you guys have been doing with this podcast and your happy hour and man, it's tough being in sports media nowadays, isn't it? Just because sports, it's on pause, right? Mm-hmm. Like they're not dead, but it's a very interesting time.
So with wrestling, the people that are maybe our demographic watching this, right? They know you on the wrestling mat, but you're covering other sports too that maybe people maybe not follow in season or out of season. So what is it after the NCAA championships? Like, do you focus into baseball? I mean, obviously we haven't been able to have a whole lot of practice, but how does that life work for you after wrestling?
It's intriguing because like wrestling is the beat, and we're in a unique spot in Iowa where wrestling means a lot to a lot of people. Like the word I always come back to is passionate, for better or for worse. Like that's just, you know this, you grew up here, right? So wrestling coverage never really ends, right? And I'm lucky enough to have editors and bosses who kind of give me a lot of leeway in terms of what I do during the off season, or like, you know, freestyle and Greco season as we call it. So this one's been a little bit more unique, but normally after like the NCAAs, I'm looking ahead to, you know, freestyle and Greco, like when's the state tournament, you know, usually here for Iowa, freestyle and Greco state tournaments, because that's, you know, it's usually at Southeast Polk. That kind of puts into gear what the rest of the spring and summer is going to look like when it comes to, you know, national duels, who's going to certain regionals, obviously Fargo. And so, you know, I'm looking ahead to that. Like, you know, are there kids that I can highlight, you know, who might be about to go through the recruiting process? Are there kids who, you know, I can talk to that, you know, hey, what is this past season? They had a really good year. What does it mean for them moving forward? And, you know, everybody always wants to know about the heavy hitters, and I try to go a little bit, you know, obviously you give them a lot of love when it comes to coverage, right? But I try to go underneath that, you know, like who are the next kids? You know, everybody knows about Drake Ayala and Caleb Rachi, for example. Mm-hmm. But then there's other kids like, you know, Jack Gockel from Sergeant Bluff Luton, Adam Aronson from Union LaPorte City, Aiden Noonan, you know, he's a rock star now after what he did in February. You know, what are those kids up to? Like, what's their recruitments look like? What are their summer plans? What are they going to do? Things like that. And so, you know, sometimes that means, you know, lists, like, you know, who are the kids to watch going into Fargo? You know, I say my editors give me a lot of leeway when it comes to Fargo usually every year, because I just, you know, as wrestling fans, we take that week and we just sit and we watch, or we make the drive up to Fargo and we catch all the action, you know, U16, juniors, the women. And so, like, I take that week and I write nothing but wrestling, you know, like, what is it? Like, you know, when Griffin Little got to the finals last year at the cadet, I still call it cadet at 16U, but, you know, he got to the freestyle national finals. So, like, I wrote a little bit about Griffin Little, wrote a little bit about Ayala winning again. You know, I always write something on Greco because I don't think it ever gets enough love, and I'm going to keep writing that until it gets a little bit more love. So, But then on top of all of that, I still cover other sports, because there's spring sports in Iowa. I probably do 85-90% wrestling, but then, there's track and field, and we kind of center it around the bigger events, at least at the Register. I know a lot of smaller papers do a lot more in-depth coverage, and at least for their areas. But, we focus on like Drake on the state track and field meet, the state soccer tournaments at county, which are just, right here in Des Moines. Then I focus a lot on state baseball. I helped out with state softball a little bit last year. I had planned on doing that again this summer, and it sounds like after today's announcement that those might still be on the table. So I do primarily wrestling, but I also do a lot of other sports as well.
Are the other writers in Iowa? I mean, when it comes to wrestling events, Iowa has to have the most journalists on the media row from a newspaper standpoint.
Seems like
right?
that, right?
It is. I mean, either we have the most or they stay the longest, because it's always you guys, KJ, Nelly, all those guys, right? All you guys that are just grinding, doing your stuff to get that article out for the newspaper the next day. So, with talking with these guys, do they get off the beat of the wrestling too, or is that just unique to the Register? Because I just remember Hamilton like covering like NASCAR sometimes. So like do they? It sounds like you get quite a bit of leeway.
Yeah, they give me a little bit of leeway as long as I take care of my other stuff, right? And so that means focusing on Drake relays, making sure that I've got our bases covered, that we make sure we've got the big stories covered for track, soccer, golf, even. Like I know KJ does a lot of golf when he's not doing like football in the fall for the Cedar Rapids Gazette. KJ Pilcher. Jim Nelson does a lot of other stuff for the Waterloo Courier. I think I saw him at girls state basketball, because sometimes I have to pitch in on that too. Mm-hmm. And so I think we're all we've got our hands on a lot of things. Like wrestling might be our primary things. Like that's what we do first and foremost, and that's probably how people know us. But, a lot of these, a state tournament, for example, and we know this from wrestling specifically. Sometimes that takes a team effort if you want to cover it. And so wrestling, it's 4 days nonstop action. For basketball, for example, because I've had to help out with both of those. Like we have our primary lead guys. So like for the Register, it's like Matthew Bain. He does a lot of recruiting. I'm sure that Iowa and Iowa State fans probably know him from a recruiting standpoint. But he also, he's kind of our lead guy when it comes to boys basketball. And so what I do during state wrestling is what he does during boys state basketball. Okay. And then I kind of help him a little bit where he needs it that week. And so it takes a team effort to cover a big state tournament, because we know how, not just wrestling, but high school sports in general are huge here in the state of Iowa.
And when it comes to breaking news, there really hasn't been a whole lot of crazy stuff. Mark Perry leaving the Hawkeye Wrestling Club, that was a big story.
It was a weird story.
Gilman leaving, it's been a few weeks in there, so we don't have to go down that road, but there really hasn't been a ton of crazy stuff, not a ton of huge recruits too. I got to imagine that this is affecting that. They can't go on campus, or, the coaches can't come see you. So, have you been chatting it up with any coaches to be like, what the heck are you guys, how the heck are you guys managing this to really prepare their teams for the future?
Yeah, no, I've talked to a handful of coaches. I've talked to obviously a lot of kids as well. And, because this summer for the juniors who are about to become seniors, it's a big summer for them on the mat, like guys like Aiden Noonan, Adam Aronson, guys who haven't committed yet, right? This is a big summer, spring and summer for them to figure out, to at least get that exposure in front of other D1 coaches or other coaches, if they want to go wrestle at the next level. And so I've talked to them about that, hey, how are coaches reaching out to you since you can't see them face to face? Lots of FaceTime calls, lots of phone calls, some virtual visits, like Zoom visits. I know coaches have presentations and stuff for them. So it's been, it's done more than just pause sports as we know it. It's really changed a lot of things. And especially if we don't have Fargo, for example, I know a lot of the regionals and the national duels and all that stuff are out the window, and the age level world trials, the dates for those have come and gone. But if Fargo really doesn't happen, then it really gets interesting, because not only are you talking about kids that don't get exposure, you're talking about coaches that are really going to be tested in the way of talent evaluation, right? So it's going to be really interesting from a recruiting standpoint for some of these kids, wrestlers specifically, but really even all sports, if we don't get back to normal maybe sooner rather than later. It's very interesting.
One thing that I've also noticed too is we were going down a trend where we were seeing a lot of sophomores commit, and some young kids, freshmen too, committing, and at least nothing's really trip my trigger. I haven't seen anything on social where like big name freshman has committed, which I always thought was kind of weird too, because the coaches and the contact rules and all that stuff. But we haven't seen a whole lot of that. Maybe they're not able to. Some of these guys, they go on their visits on their own dime. I'm guessing a lot of these sophomores did. We're not seeing a ton of that. Do you have the same feel or?
Well, I mean, right now, like, I don't know that official visits are allowed, or even unofficial visits, like on-campus visits, like kids can't be there, and that's an NCAA rule, so that's even out of the coach's hands. So that's why a lot of FaceTime calls, a lot of phone calls. I know there are some. I've heard it a little bit with wrestling, but a lot more with like football and basketball, where coaches are lining up Zoom meetings or virtual visits to talk with these kids. And so, getting those kids on campus, like that face to face, that's how a lot of coaches sell their program and sell their campus and sell their school. Cause it's a lot more than just, hey, come wrestle. Like, hey, come get your education here. Live in Ames or Iowa City. Like, let's show you this place. And they can't do that. So it's really, not just talent evaluation, but like how good of a salesman are you, right? Like that's what some of these coaches are starting to find out a little bit. And so, yeah, we've seen maybe a few commitments here and there, but not a ton since everything's kind of been put on pause.
The ones that will have their communication stuff figured out, like the guys that had no Snapchat, Instagram Live, those are the guys that are going to be, I think, have a little leg up, right? Because, when they get on campus, they already know you. Who these guys are, if they're, the more personal they are, when they hopefully they can get a feel for that over the phone, and then you get them on campus, then boom, sold. So I'll be curious to see how, when things do open up, like, do we see a ton of commitments just coming down the pipe, or if these guys are going to, I'm hoping that they're having multiple conversations. So do they go to the other visits, or, football season? I mean, it's going to affect a whole kinds of, situations and commitments and whatnot. So you mentioned one thing about Fargo being huge for coaches and the athletes to get,
just to get the exposure.
Yeah, you get exposure,
right?
You get on the big stage, you never know who's going to see you there, right? So what, you talked with USA Wrestling. What are some of the things that you've been hearing?
Yeah, so it sounds like USA Wrestling is a lot more optimistic maybe than they would have been a few weeks ago in terms of, making sure Fargo gets off the ground. Because what I've seen and what kind of prompted me to reach out to them is that, I think the AAU has a youth volleyball tournament, or at least like a, youth high school, younger age national volleyball tournament that is going to still take place as far as I know next month. There's been some Little League baseball that's been played in and around the country a little bit. So like there's a lot of youth sports or high school sports that are, trying to get up off the ground. Because when you kind of look at this thing, and we don't have to dive into too much of the statistics, but, younger adults have been significantly less affected by this, right? The coronavirus. So, what can they do to try and keep doing these things? And we're slowly starting to see sports come back really at all levels. And so that kind of prompted my question, hey, we're seeing all of these things happen, youth, high school. What does this mean for Fargo? Because obviously that's high school kids. And so the message I got back is that basically they're trying to work with the state of North Dakota. They're trying to work with North Dakota State University to try and figure out, because one of the hiccups, and you've been to Fargo, they put the kids in the dorms. North Dakota State's not going to allow that. And so they're trying to find a way to house the kids if they do bring them up there. It sounds like some states have said that if you host it, we're not going. Other states have said if you do host it, we will come. And so, they're just trying to work out the particulars at this point. The regionals are done. So what does qualifying look like? Do you just nix it and say sign up? If you pay the fee, you can come. What are safety precautions? Are we going to test all these kids? Are we just going to check for fevers and things like that? Like it's a lot of minute details. But a few weeks back, USA Wrestling I think was less optimistic, and it sounds like the deadline they have. And they have meetings weekly about this. Sounds like the deadline they put for themselves is June 1. Can they figure something out with North Dakota State to make it work if they're able to put a lot of things in place? And so at least that's what I'm hearing.
Yeah.
So because I knew it was in jeopardy as soon as they nixed off all the age level trials and the regionals, which made me less optimistic. And so now it sounds like there's a better chance than there was maybe a few weeks ago. That's the short of it.
Was there any conversation about possibly going somewhere else that would allow, if they can't get it into the university, maybe they go somewhere else that says, yeah, come on over,
I'm sure there's that possibility. I'll be honest, that's not a question I asked because it sounds like they want to keep it there if they can, just because the Fargo Dome, it's the perfect setup for a big tournament like that. Because one of my questions I had, it's when it comes to attendance, we've all been to Fargo. It's not a heavily attended event, right? It's not like an Iowa Wrestling Duel where there's 14,000 people at Carver. It's mostly just parents, and even then, a lot of those parents are coaches. So there's really not a lot of people in the stands. The heavy numbers come in the participants, and so. Depending on which states say yes and which states say no, maybe you take a few mats off the floor to space things out a little bit. You put in social distancing guidelines when people are on the floor. Only so many people can be on the floor at one time. Maybe it's, if you're on deck, that's when you can be on the floor. There's things to do to maybe try and space things out and make it safer a little bit. And that was probably more my primary question. I don't know if they'll move it, but I wonder if that'll at least come up in conversation. I think they'd be silly to at least not discuss it, right?
I mean, the how much revenue it brings in too.
Yeah,
it's a huge event for them. So, and if they do just open it up, so if you pay for it, come on in. There has been that qualifying process, so kids just haven't been able to go. So, how big can this thing get? If you do, it would be a logistical probably nightmare if you are checking fevers. But it might be a necessity. You're going to have to have a lot more volunteers. So I'm sure that's in the conversation. Like, hey, we're going to need this many more people. I know there are ways now to where you used to have like 3 or 4 people at the table. There are ways to reduce that now with some technology. So they could reduce some people at the tables. But man, there's a lot of people at Fargo, and just looking back now, like. When we did War at West Gym, there was, at the time, you could still have mass gatherings.
Yeah.
And I was on pins and needles to have an event. Like, what if someone, does get sick? We've seen NCAA Division III, they got canceled that weekend. At that time, the governor hadn't put anything into place. So, I think if they follow what the state guidelines are, because things are different in North Dakota than they are in Iowa.
Exactly.
In Illinois, but you also have states flying in from maybe a at-risk state. So I could see why other states would be like, I don't want to deal with New York, or whatever it may be.
And that was, that's kind of why they nixed off the big dance, right? The NCAA Division I championships, because, we were all going to meet up in Minneapolis. We were all going to stay in the same arena for 3-4 days in a row, just all jam-packed. They sold, 45,000 plus tickets all 6 sessions. So that was the threat, that somebody would bring it and then it would spread, right? And so that's obviously something they want to take care of here. The other thing I think is wrestling's kind of uniquely suited for, because when people go for weigh-ins, right, they do skin checks, they do, hair, nails, all that stuff. Do you just need an extra doctor there, or however many weigh-in lines you have to just check the fever real quick? Is that I don't want to say that that's the only basis you go off of, but that's probably something that they're going to talk about. How do we keep this as safe as possible? Is it just a matter of adding another doctor, or when they do the skin check, just, hey, let me check your fever real quick, let me check your temperature, if you're good, go. That's something that they could do. And wrestling is uniquely suited for that because we're used to all these other medical checks that we do before we weigh in, right?
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. And they should look at, the UFC had 3 events in the last week.
Yeah.
3 events, and pretty damn similar to wrestling.
Yeah.
So follow what they're doing. And the fact, like you said, the weigh-in thing, the guidelines they're already there to do these things. That makes sense on the athlete side of things. So I hope the heck it happens to get these kids back on the mat, because it's the mental side of things have just been probably tough on a lot of wrestlers. So I want to go back to, talking about the NCAA championships and just kind of what that's done for coverage at IAwrestle and Des Moines Register, and for you guys too, with all basketball. I gotta imagine those storylines. You never know what's going to happen to Iowa State, the big names for basketball. Like, who could be the Cinderella story? Iowa's having a good season basketball wise, obviously Iowa wrestling wise. What was it like in the war room at the Des Moines Register? Like, oh crap, like.
It was like, man, the only way I could describe it was that it was like watching everything unfold was like a car wreck, man. And the more you looked at it, the more you couldn't turn away. And so it was just it wasn't an unproductive week, but we came back from Big Tens, and I didn't get back until late Monday night, just because I had a couple of flight hiccups. But Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, it was just one thing after another, and Rudy Gobert tests positive, and then boom, the NBA's done. And then the very next day it was, I mean, at that point we kind of knew that it was like a matter of time. And I mean, since then, like that, I mean, that kind of led into, and I think a lot of people probably felt this way, March dragged. And then since then, it seems like we've maybe found a footing in the way of work. And so like, I personally, I was partially reassigned in the newsroom. So like, I'm still, on top of wrestling and stuff, like when these kids have their commitments and when other random news comes out, or if I'm able to write some, spot features, like there was a story about Pat Lugo that I wanted to write ahead of the NCAA championships. And that just, you twist it a little bit because instead of, hey, it's this guy that, found a home at Iowa and now he's going into the last biggest tournament of his career to, hey, he had a hell of a season and, the last tournament of his career got stripped from him it was out of his control. And so like you twist that story a little bit, you can still get that one out. The NFL draft still happened. So we got to, you guys know this, we got to talk about Tristan Wirfs a little bit. And, so it's been different, man. I'm not full sports. I'm slowly making my way back fully to sports, but I've been helping out around the newsroom with just some like spot news, some breaking news. I've been helping out with some other coronavirus related stories. And so I'm thankful that I have a job.
Yeah.
So I can't complain too much. But dang it, do I miss sports, right? Just like the rest of us.
Yeah. With that said too, I mean, with newspapers, and we've all seen kind of what that road has gone for guys like you, and you've got a job, so being thankful for that job, right. Every day you're like, hell yeah, like I'm gonna go do whatever I have to do. If I gotta cover news that I don't really want to, that's you gotta do what you gotta do. So, have they been making, we've been hearing publicly like universities like, this is what we're gonna make cuts of in order, like, the future. What are some things that you can share that reassure people at home that are like, hey, we're still going to be able to get the Des Moines Register during the week, like, nothing, we don't have anything to worry about. Can you share any of those things that maybe?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure people have noticed that, since probably mid-March, like our sports section's been significantly smaller during the week, and then we keep the same regular big size on Sundays. Because we kind of, if throughout the week, like all the sports writers are still, if we have a cool story that we want to roll out, we usually try and save it for Sunday unless it's kind of a day-to-day breaking news thing. But like our sports section's smaller. Our paper, I think, as a whole is a little bit smaller just because, we're not sending people out to go cover all these big sporting events. Like we had a really big March plan, not just, me going to Minneapolis, but like Chad Leistico, who's our Iowa columnist, was going to come with me. We had, Big 10, Big 12 basketball tournaments going on. The NCAA tournament was getting ready to come up. Like we had a lot of really big things planned. And so just none of it happened. And so it's just, we're trying to save money where we can. Gannett instituted some furloughs. I know I've probably tweeted about that. Like I've already gone on 2 furlough weeks, which stinks because I don't sit still very well. And so it's, like things change, but we just kind of roll with the punches a little bit. Like you said, we got to do what we got to do, right? Like I, if anybody has hung out with me in any sort of capacity of time, they know that I say champions always adjust, right? So that means, in this case, that means, hey, like sports aren't happening at least day to day or every day, but, stay on top of your stuff and, just kind of do what your bosses ask of you. And, that's what we got to do. So it's been a challenge for sure because it's, I came here to, write sports and, once I got the job specifically to write wrestling. And hasn't been able to do that, which is fine. But I do miss it. It's tough. Yeah. It's really tough. So
with you at the Register, the news came out, Dan McCool passed. He was a guy that was,
he was a legend.
Yeah. I mean, how old were you when he was? So I was trying to think when he was writing stories, like the, early 2000s.
Early 2000s, I would have been in elementary school or middle school.
So yeah, he was here, covering the state wrestling tournament at the barn, dude. And then, Hamilton came in, and did you have a, we don't know the value. I guess, sometimes we look back when something like this happens, or like, man, we didn't value that guy enough. Like he, has there been any, I guess, motivation when it comes to like how people, when it happened, everyone's like, holy cow, like this was a big deal for you as a writer at the paper that you used to work for going forward, like any motivation or anything like that?
So not really. So he passed when I was on my furlough week, and one of the things they told us about our furlough week is basically don't tweet. And both times that I've been on furlough, I basically just taken the week to just kind of decompress and stay off social media. Which, I mean, obviously, like I still get on it every day and I read the tweets. And I tell you what, man, I wish I would have gotten to know the Dan McCool that everybody was tweeting about, because I didn't have a lot of interactions with him for one reason or another. And I tried to seek him out on a couple of occasions. And then there are other times where sometimes you just get too busy, right?
Yeah.
And so, you hear these stories about how cool he is, how he remembers specific details about wrestlers, and he goes and he shares these guys' stories just like, Andy Hamilton did, just like Chris Cuellar did, just like I do. And, you wish you can, there was a story floating around there that he remembered specifically that some wrestler used a different colored shoelace at the state tournament or something like that, like just little details like that. Yeah. Right. And so, I wish I would have met that guy. Yeah. I really did. And, him and I didn't have a lot of interaction. He gruff, but really nice. Or at least those are the stories that I've heard. And, I'm not sure that his relationship with the Des Moines Register was great after he left. I don't know the full story about why he left or any of that jazz, but I at least from what I've heard through second and third hand was that just that he didn't look fondly at the Register, or maybe even a lot of news organizations for whatever reason.
Yeah.
And so, I kind of get that. If somebody at some point somebody else is going to write wrestling for the Register, and I'm going to look at it and probably go, that's not the way I'd do it, right? Yeah. And so. I guess I sort of get that, but I wish I would have met the guy that everybody was tweeting about. Like that was kind of my biggest takeaway when I saw that news break and everybody was talking about it, because I didn't meet that guy.
That's a very good point, because I had a conversation. Why didn't he ever come work for IAwrestle, or why wasn't he doing freelance for other people? And I reached out to a couple of times, like, hey, how do we get your brain in our site and do some things about history? And he just was like, nope, like never, like had no interest whatsoever. And I just is like, well, the guy's kind of like a legend in the, he's a legend in the sports world in Des Moines for wrestling. Like, I'm not gonna, maybe he just wanted to chill. And I know he was writing some books, and I just got his book in the mail, so maybe he was busy doing that, and that's why he didn't like talk to guys like us, I guess. Like, we're not like OGs, I guess you could say. So, but nonetheless, I took pretty much the same thing away with you, as I wish I would have tried maybe more and pushed him, like, cause he was a stubborn dude, and I wish I would have pushed him a little more to, like, break down that shell to where, you see him interacting with coaches, and, he's telling stories, and, he had better relationships with other people, and that's fine. So, I know that they're doing a scholarship fund.
I love that.
If anyone does, I've had a couple of people reach out to me. So if you're watching this and where there's a way to make a monetary donation to that fund, please link in below in the comments. So if there's somebody out there watching this, there was in the obituary that you could donate to Humane Society, I believe it was, but somebody wanted to actually donate to the scholarship. So if anybody has that link, I'd love you to be able to share it here in the comment section, so people are watching, people like me can get out there and figure it out. So please do that. So if you also too, if you're right now, if you are watching on live here on Facebook, we're on Periscope, we're on Rokfin as well. If you are a Rokfin subscriber, hopefully you've been enjoying our top 100 of the past decade. We've ranked all these guys. It's been interesting to just kind of see some of these names come back to back in 2010, before I was really covering. We had IAwrestle. To see those names being up there with Jack Wagner, Cale Happel, and some of those names haven't come out yet. We're down to we've released 75, and the top 25 will come out tomorrow. So if you're a Rokfin subscriber, you've been able to enjoy those. Those come out tomorrow morning. But yeah, we got this available. Maybe podcasts. I've kind of been getting it out a couple days late, but yes, you can watch the video version on Rokfin, Facebook, on Twitter. So appreciate you guys all listening on this. If you got questions for myself, mainly Cody, I would love you guys to just put a comment in the section, just a little bit maybe about his coverage or anything it may be about for Cody. So put that in. I am watching all these comments. So
y'all know I love interacting with you guys.
Yeah,
let's see it.
So Jackie Frisch, Joe, Rainey Lewis, Fellers. Yeah, you can turn off I've been getting your text message. You can turn this off now if you want. Josh Park. Appreciate y'all coming in here and commenting. So, kind of wrap up the Dan McCool deal. Hopefully that scholarship raises funds and his legacy can kind of move on with that and people remember him. And I know that the Predicament is selling some T-shirts, so you can go on the Predicament's Twitter handle and you can buy the T-shirts. I'm not sure how you buy them, but they're on the Twitter handle. So
with money.
Yeah. So I mean, hopefully I didn't see a link on there, so you can find that on the Predicament. So, all right, let's move forward here. Moving forward to next season, right? We don't know if Fargo's happening, so like we gotta start thinking, okay, what do the storylines look like if we are back on the mat collegiately? Not like high school, right?
We'll get back on the mat.
So there was something who came out with it saying like football and wrestling was like at more risk than basketball and volleyball.
I get it, but I am of the belief and that we're closer to the end of this thing than we are the beginning. And I'd like to think that the UFC at least laid a blueprint for wrestling and for other sports that are in close contact like that, like football, like, volleyball, probably not as much, but basketball, in the paint, there's a lot of contact there. So we're moving in the right direction. I have every belief that the 2021 season is it may look different at the beginning. Heck, it may look different all season, but I have the belief that it'll happen.
All right. So wrestling season starts. Leading up, what are some of the storylines that you're following? Obviously, Iowa didn't, very big favorite to win the NCAA championship in 2020. How's it looking in 2021 for you? We'll just start with the Hawkeyes.
Man, my favorite line has been this Iowa team was so good that it took a global pandemic to keep them from winning a national title. That's how good they were. Not a wrestler, not a team. It took a pandemic to keep them from winning it this year. That's how good they were. Dude, they're going to be just as good next year. There might be a couple question marks about what some lineup spots might look like. I mean, specifically 41-49. I know Jaden Ironman has told me specifically that he's probably going to stick at 41, which makes you think that Max Murin will probably bump up. And you may have been in on that interview with me a couple years ago where we were talking to him because he looks like a pretty stout 41-pounder.
Yep.
And so it wouldn't be anything to, bump up, right, to 49 whenever the time came, and maybe this is the time. So outside of that, I mean, everybody's come back. That group of
Carter Happel, Murin, Ironman, that'll be interesting to kind of see where they all go. I mean, Ironman would be a huge 41-pounder. How is he managing his weight right now? Like, I don't know what he weighs, but he just seems like a bigger dude.
He does. And the one thing he's probably not like a massive 41-pounder, but he's good size. I mean, he's strong, very strong. And this was back in November, so things can change, obviously. But he told me he was only hovering around 150. Like, okay. He's not huge.
He seems like he's big, but 150 ain't bad. This
right.
guy's cutting hell of a lot more than that. Okay, so yeah, the team is going to be just as stacked. There has been some things floating around, redshirting Assad up. Could that be a possibility? How do you want to keep him in the lineup, keep him out? What are your thoughts on?
They've got some flexibility. I mean, it's fun to play with this stuff, right? Because, if you redshirt Abe, you could, in theory, bump Kemmer up to 84 and slide in Nelson at 74. I don't know if that's something that they've discussed, but it's definitely a possibility, right? Or maybe you stick with Abe at 84, keep Kem at 74, and then, Nelson's got to beat one of them or Marinelli to get into the lineup. And that's kind of the beauty of, hindsight's 2020. It sucks that Abe ended up losing a year because they took his red shirt off, but now he still has his red shirt available. So, do you bring Glazier down? He wasn't a big 97 when he was wrestling during his red shirt year. So, he's a potential option. I still think Nelson was and we really saw it at the Midlands. I mean, very undersized at 84. His motor is going to keep him in every single match. But, the question after he beat Colbray, at least for me back in November, was, okay, how many points can he score in March? And the Midlands were going to reveal a lot because it was going to be back-to-back-to-back matches over the course of a couple of days against 84-pounders. And I think we saw that the size was, I mean, it made it hard, right?
Yeah.
It made it hard, and especially when you get up to that weight, and his gas tank, like I said, is going to keep him in every match, but it's just, you could tell the size wore on him a little bit. And so he'd probably be a more natural fit at 74. Maybe you can, after Marinelli leaves, like, do you suck him all the way back down to 65, or do you slide him in at 74 and PK goes? Patrick Kennedy, after he redshirts, does he go in at 65? I mean, they've got a lot of flexibility in the future, but somebody brought it up to me, I think, yesterday. Do you redshirt Abe, Kemmer at 84, Nelson at 74? It's an option. I hadn't thought of it before. And I guess I don't believe it until I see it, right? But it's an option for sure. It's fun to kind of tinker with the lineup that way.
There was a little bit of talk that they didn't think that they were going to get Kemmer back, or if they knew that they would get him back, but would he come back?
Oh,
right?
100%.
So I heard some things that he's like, he's a smart ass dude. So like he was just going to go into business and, but I mean, those are rumors or.
I know if somebody brought it up to me, why would he had gone anywhere else? I mean, this dude loves Iowa through and through. I mean, the story has been well told by now by, multiple different people, myself included, that, I mean, he didn't have the best visit and he still committed to Iowa. And this was after obviously Tom Brands drove, 14 hours through the night to go re-recruit him after his official visit. But, if you don't have a great official visit and then you still commit to it, I mean, that should show you everything you need to know about how much that kid loves this place, right? So it would have been a huge shock to me if he would have gotten the 6th year and gone somewhere else, or gotten the 6th year and declined it, right? Because, I mean, he wants to win a national title, and he could have maybe done it this year, but he didn't get that opportunity, and now he's got one more shot at it.
I never saw them letting him go. Like, no, you are going to use it. Like, come on, you're not walking away. Like, it would be hard. So I'm just surprised that those rumors were floating around. All right, so Iowa going to be top-ranked the team going into 2021. Iowa State, UNI. Iowa State, I think they had.
Dude, they're gonna be sneaky good this year. I'm gonna say it. They're gonna be sneaky good this year, especially. And as far as I know, everything's in line for it to do it. As long as Gomez gets all the way back down to 33, and it sounds like that's obviously the plan. Mm-hmm. You're looking at Mackel, Gomez, Parker, Dagan, maybe David Carr at 57, maybe David Carr at 65. Then you'll probably have an Isaac Judge, a Zane Mulder, what's his name, Logan Schumacher potentially in the other weight. 57 might be a heavy cut for Schumacher. But then Colbray, some combination of Marcus Coleman, Joel Shapiro, Julian Broderson, and then Gannon Gremmel. Like, that's a pretty good team, guys. Like, they're going to be pretty fun to watch. Like, are they going to be on the same level as Iowa? No, but that's an intriguing duel because of all the, there's enough swing matches there that if they go all the way to one side or the other, you could be looking at a blowout like we saw last year, or you could be looking at a pretty close duel like we saw the year before. Like, Iowa State's an intriguing team, man.
What I want to watch is there were some times where Kevin Dresser got pretty upset with the team, and he basically called them out, right? At some of those duels in the post conference and how they were reacting, and with all the stuff that's going on, with them not having as much contact with them, right? I'd be curious to see how things are going up there, and did they react to him the way that they wanted him to? So because they're going to need that in order to be the team, that you're saying. And Austin Gomez, he's a big key to getting.
That is an X factor.
He's got to get down to 133, and it sounds like he got up there quite a bit. So hopefully he can get down.
Lots of tacos. And what I think the year away, because he had a concussion and he was able to get a medical red shirt, I think the year away was probably a little revealing for him to just kind of, because he got to see this team through the lens of sitting on the bench. Like, they were kind of doing their own thing, and then Dresser lit into them after they lost to Oklahoma State, and then they really turned things around after that, And so, I mean, he kind of got to see the way that Iowa State responded, and, I mean, they wrestled really well down the stretch, ended up second at Big 12s. I mean, at one point they were in first place on the second day. That was a heck of a team performance. They were taking 9 to the NCAA championships. There's promising young recruits coming in. There's guys that are going to come off red shirt. This is a team, like, there's still some upward momentum, maybe not as much because we just didn't get to see them at the NCAA championships, right? So we weren't sure how they were going to compare from how they did the year before, but I think getting to see that probably lit a fire. And so, as far as I know, he's on his way down. I'll be honest, I haven't talked to him in quite a bit, but as far as I know, he's on his way down. I think he knows that, he needs to get into that spot because, you read off that lineup again. If he, as long as he's at 33, I mean, that's a sneaky good team, man.
Yep. They have to have him in there. They brought him in. He was a name that, really,
he got to the blood round as a redshirt freshman, and I know people at the deepest weight in the country that year, and that's obviously he wants to be on the podium. Heck, he wants to win the dang thing. Yeah. This is a junior world team member, but that's not nothing, right? Like to reach the blood round in your first full collegiate season at the deepest weight in the country, we know this kid's good. We know this kid's good. And
he's got all the success on the freestyle side of things too. He hasn't been able to have that too because of injuries, which sucks to see too. All right, so Iowa State, you're saying sneaky good.
Just keep an eye on it. That's all I'm saying.
UNI. Brody Teske news coming in. Will he get in the lineup? What are things? They got Biscaglia up there. I thought that was interesting just to kind of see how that all unfolded, whether you're going to go to UNI, Iowa State, with Reeves there at 25. But UNI, what's your take, kind of storylines for them?
They're going to be young, right? It's going to be a bunch of new faces because they're losing, they're losing Schwarm, they're losing Max Thompson, they're losing Lujan, Steyert, but they've got, kind of like at 25, it's Biscaglia, Teske. I know Kyle Goldhofer had a really nice redshirt year. He could probably be a factor in there. Jack Skidlarczyk, I think, really figured a lot of things out at 33. I'd like to see him get a little bit bigger. I guess I don't know exactly how much he weighs, but he always looked a little bit smaller at 33. But, I mean, he kind of turned into Jacob Holschlag on top, man. He really figured some things out down the stretch. Blockus at 41, he was a hammer. 49 is going to be interesting because they've got a lot of options there. And I don't, Caleb Olejnik, I know is a name that's there. Gable Fox from Don Bosco, I know he's a guy that's there. Tristan Lara may bump up from Fort Dodge. They got some options there, all Iowa guys. 57, this is where you start to see some of the question marks, right? 57, I guess Keaton Gertz is coming back and is, he'll be there. So that'd be nice to kind of see him really solidify that position. Mm-hmm. I thought that'd be his after they beat Oklahoma State because he looked really good against Wyatt Sheets. 65, like to think Lance Runyon maybe slides in there. But that could be another toss-up weight if he can't solidify it. 74, maybe we see Keegan Moore. Maybe Parker Keckeisen comes down. I know he wrestled 84 during his redshirt year, so that's where I'm assuming he'll be. But Keegan Moore, who transferred in from Oklahoma State, maybe he could be there. There's some other names in that room that are probably going to sound familiar to people. Lucas Rowland, I think, is there at UNI. He was a state champ for PCM a few years back. 97, you hope Holschlag's healthy, but if not, Tyrell Gordon took a redshirt last year, so he'll be back in the mix, and then Carter Isley at heavyweight. So really intriguing team. It's going to be a young team, but I think they got some individuals that can surprise some people. I think Keaton Gertz, I really liked what I saw from him in spurts last season. I think Lance Runyon, Keckeisen, I think Keckeisen's going to be really good. Parker Keckeisen, he was in the best of 3 finals for the junior world team a couple years back. So he's tough. And I've talked with, Drew Foster, Taylor Lujan, guys like that. They know he's tough. Like they're excited to watch that dude go. Tyrell Gordon will be back if Holschlag's not healthy. Like there's some intriguing pieces. There's going to be a lot of new faces, but it's going to be an intriguing team. And then I think the other thing people need to know about UNI is that they've got a really good recruiting class coming in with guys like, Cale Happel, Snodgrass from Ohio. They got a Florida boy coming in, Ethan Basil. I hope that I'm pronouncing that correctly. Julian Farber from Georgia, in addition to Adam Allard, Wade Mitchell. A kid from, I think his name is Dewan Johnson. I might be mispronouncing that too, or Danger Johnson. I forget. He was signed with Old Dominion. Now he's coming in. They're going to have a lot of dudes sitting in redshirt this year that are going to get ready to take the program up to the next level over the next 4 or 5 years. And so they're going to be really fun to watch in the future. But there might be a few growing pains this year, but they're going to be fun to watch. They're going to be sneaky. I'm intrigued by that UNI team this coming season.
All right, so that's...
As you can tell, I can ramble.
No, you're good. You're good. That's your mind that I love. Like, you're running all these names. I'm like, how the hell do you remember this? This is great. This is great. I love it. And all 3 teams are just rambling off these names. So you just ramble off a bunch of names. So that's great stuff. So one thing that disappointed me with all this COVID stuff too, and really the future and kind of what happened was with D3, Wartburg, the Loris, that may be a new rivalry.
Man, I was really excited to watch Loris at D3s because this was going to be the first year I was going to get to see D3s because it was in Cedar Rapids and the schedule finally opened up, and literally the day before they were starting to wrestle is when they killed everything off, and I'm not okay with it still. I'm still upset. What this shows with what Loris was able to do last year is, as a Simpson grad, like, you can turn a program around. Loris had some individuals that were good over the years, but they weren't able to put a team together to take down Wartburg at a duel in their home gym. I'm pretty sure that winning streak started when I was, like, the conference winning streak that Jim Miller started at Wartburg started when I was still in diapers.
Yeah, probably. So we've got, if you're a D3 school out there, and heck, we're at NAI, when you see Grandview just like dominating people, like, changes can happen. Like, a program like Loris didn't have the history, is able to come out and do it. Obviously, the coaches are in place, and they figured out a way. I'm sure he talked to his, Coach Miller, figured out, what his strategies were and how that happened. So I'd be curious just to see how, if tides do turn a little bit, or if it's just kind of like a 1 year, like Loris just had some good years or good kids, but they've got some good recruits too. They got Wyatt Reed. He came even from Nebraska. He's coming in. So
there's a lot of momentum out there, man. Didn't they just sign like a Greco world teamer?
Illinois, I think an Illinois guy.
I forget his name specifically, but they brought him in. They've seemingly become like the new cool shiny destination for kids that want to wrestle D3 in Iowa. Like, that's just, I've seen a lot of kids, like, they're noticing it, right? Like, they're aware of it, and sometimes that's half the battle when it comes to D3, because when you have like these institutions like Grandview and Wartburg who have just been there and they've done that, and their brand is out there, it's kind of hard to break into it, especially in Iowa where there's a crap ton of D3 schools, right? And so, like, Loris, give them a ton of credit for, not just producing on the map, but just you see them a lot more. Mm-hmm. And the ability to recognize them, and just like the fact that their brand's out there now, like, we know who the Duhawks are, right? Mm-hmm. Like, that alone, I think, is a huge success. And then, oh, by the way, like, the teams that they've been putting on the mat the last couple of years have been very, very impressive.
Not too bad.
Yeah.
All right, so another thing I wanted to get to here, I got about 15 minutes with you. All right, so women's wrestling in Iowa, it's been talking with Tucker Black a lot, with William Penn. They've got, he's working on getting a full squad together here. And I was talking with the AD a little bit about, we've seen, so Grandview right here, you've been to the duels where the girls, the women
go.
The double duels. And what are your thoughts on, and the AD didn't bring this up, but, scheduling is going to be not a nightmare, but they'll figure it out. To try to do it on the same night, right? Have the men and women at the same night. What are your thoughts on intertwining them? So you have the women's side go one match, 25, and then boom, and then go back and forth throughout it. You score them, separately, right? But like, you can maybe ride the momentum of the men or ride the momentum of the women, and you have both fan bases for men and women together cheering at one time. I think it would be a unique situation.
Unique for sure. The one question I think I would have, or I guess there's two. The first one is make sure the guy at the scorer's table knows exactly what he's doing.
Yep.
Because the women wrestle freestyle, right? Yep. And so you got to make sure that you got a guy who's able to make sure they differentiate, and you got to make sure you got good refs in place, and we have good refs here, so that part of it probably isn't an issue, but just make sure that the scorer's table doesn't get confused. But the going back and forth, like the alternating between like 25 and then like the smallest weight for women's like 101, and then 33 and then 109, and that might get confusing to the casual fan. And so maybe before you do something really unique like that, I think maybe you just start with the women, and like the women, all 10 matches, get that duel, and then all the men's. I think you start with that, and then maybe once you start to really build up a following, maybe you start to like interweave them or intertwine them. Because I like the idea of playing off the energy. Like, if the men have a huge win at like 33 and then the women are coming out at 116, play on that, mm-hmm. Like I love that. It's almost like a tournament setting. But maybe that gets confusing to a casual fan who just walks in the gym that night and it's like, oh, there's two separate duels going on, but they're, and I think the idea of trying to draw in the casual fan, like we kind of want to simplify things before we really get to experimenting, right? But I like the idea of a double duel, whether, maybe one night the women have the bigger, higher profile matchups, so maybe you put them second, and then like the men are kind of the first duel. I wouldn't have any issue with that. I think that'd be really cool to kind of highlight whoever has the bigger matchups, or, maybe there's one individual big time matchup in the women's duel. And so maybe you put the women's duel second, and then that's the very last match. Kind of build it up that way. I don't know. There's some things you can do, but I worry that you might really confuse people
with folk style, freestyle.
Yeah, if you just continue to go back and forth like that.
I could see that definitely be confusing, but also if you're coming to an NAI duel, and we're not talking D1 yet, right? Or any really just casual fan. How many casual fans are really rolling into that gym that they're not going to know what the heck freestyle is anyways if they're a casual fan, so they're already going to be confused. The reason why, if we do what you said, where sometimes we go, women second, men first, is like, hey, why do women always have to go first? Our society, we just always, somehow the women just always have to go first, like about boys in a basketball game, like girls go, then boys go. I don't know. Anyways, but intertwining them. So if the women's duel gets over, most of those fans are a good share of them are gonna leave. So if you kind of intertwine them somehow, maybe it's just like a 1 year, like mid-season duel, kind of like a Beauty and the Beast, like that's a, or it's just kind of an event, right? You find two teams that are like, let's just do this. It'll be fun. And it's not something that you just regularly do. That's not, I wasn't trying to say like, hey, this is what we should do.
No, but just kind of like a one-off.
Yeah, like a one-off. No,
that's a fair
thing.
point. Yeah.
So that's, I don't know.
But what if here's a thought, and maybe this has been discussed already, and maybe Tucker's already thinking of this, but just wrestling them side by side, like start them at 25, start them at 101, and then just go at the same time. And so that way you've got all sorts of energy in that gym, and nobody leaves because, well, they want to watch this match, but then also that match is coming up and they want to watch it, and they don't,
Okay.
That could be an option.
Yep.
I mean, it'd almost be kind of like, we see in high school duels like a JV setup where they have 2 or 3 mats out there and they're just rolling all the matches out first available. So maybe you do that, just one duel for the women, one duel for the men, and then everybody's going ballistic. Just a thought. I don't know.
Yeah.
Like that could be something.
I just want us to think, get unique with it a little bit if we can, is to maybe get some more interest into women's wrestling.
100%.
That are there's still people out there too that we're trying to convert over, right? That are just like men's wrestling, right? Men's wrestling.
I think we're seeing a lot less of that, though.
There is
a ton less of that.
Yeah, and it comes from above, like the coaches staff, the leaders in the schools. The leaders are the ones that are be like, yeah, we're supporting this. You're gonna get this going. And I challenged Coach Wignall from Ankeny a little bit on, why don't we see more women in the CIML, right? I mean, biggest conference, hardest conference in the state, and you see up in Northeast Iowa, Lincoln had some girls.
Lincoln had some girls. Ankeny Centennial had some girls.
But it's nothing like it is. Iowa City has they started a team, boom, up in Northeast Iowa. Like how these guys do? What do we need to do?
Charles City, Waverly.
What are you, as someone that covers a lot of the metro teams? What do you think is the holdup?
See, I don't think there's a holdup. I mean, sometimes it's just general interest. Some schools have it and some schools don't. Like that happens. A lot of it's on the coaches. Like, and that's good, bad, and different. Like those are the guys that need to go into their schools and recruit the girls. Like that's, look at what Whitcomb did at Waverly Shell Rock. Look at what Jennings did at Osage. Look at what Iowa City West did. There are ways to go and do it. And sometimes you get one girl, sometimes you get 20. Dubuque Waller, that was another, that first year with the girls team, they had 20 girls out there, took awesome. Third at the girls state tournament. They had a state champ this year. And Joel Allen went into the hallways and recruited the heck out of these girls. He got a couple and he looked at those couple that were really into it and he said, all right, go get your friends and we can do this. Like, what do we need to do to make it happen? Separate practices? Okay, we'll make it work. And coaches, more and more coaches are starting to see a willingness to do that, because I think there's a lot more coaches that see that there are a handful of girls in their school already that want to do this. And so they go to those girls and say, okay, what do we need to do so that you can bring your friends with you and that you can bring more girls into this? Does that mean separate practices? Does that mean this, that, and the next? And we're seeing a lot more coaches take that extra step to go do it. Why don't we see it more in CIML? That's a great question. I think we're starting to see a little bit more of it now. Ankeny Centennial had a handful of girls. The Des Moines City schools always have a handful of girls here and there. Like you said, Lincoln had, what was it, 5 or 6?
Yeah.
It's only going to be, I think it's only a matter of time before more and more of them start to pop up, because maybe they needed to see that Ankeny Centennial had a few girls, or maybe they needed to see that Lincoln had a few girls, and now, 3 or 4 girls may show up at Johnston, 3 or 4 girls may show up at Valley, maybe they just need the visual of it, and the numbers will pop.
That's what I was hoping was going to happen with what Roland was doing at Lincoln. And, they got some press out of it. They got some pretty good press out of it. And that's why I was, all right, we're going to see some other bigger schools, go out and get some. And we just didn't see it happen. And it just intrigues me that we have the largest population. The schools are the largest. How can we not get at least a handful out of some of these schools? So I'm challenging, and I'm going to challenge myself too at Johnston to see how we can maybe do something. So we'll be kind of curious to see how that goes. So, all right. One more thing I was thinking of. All right. We'll end with this. We kind of touched on a little bit with Hawkeye Wrestling Club. I know you're connected out there with that crew. Bringing back Dan Dennis, losing obviously Gilman, losing the women. What's next for the Hawkeye Wrestling Club? What do they need to go out and get a big name? What's your opinion of the next step, or do you know what the next step is?
The next step seems pretty logical when you just look at the makeup of the Iowa team that's coming back this year, right? They're gonna have a guy seemingly at every international weight. Like, you're gonna have Spencer at 57. If DeSanto wants to go freestyle, you'll have him at 61. You'll have Jaden Ironman at 65. Brandon Sorensen, God bless that kid, as long as he's still healthy and wants to come back and wrestle, he could go in at 70. 74 is Marinelli. 79 is Michael Kemmer. He could bump up to 86 if he wants to continue to eat. Sammy Brooks is still at 86 as far as I know. I'm not sure how much further he's going to go. But that's also a natural spot for Abe Assad to take as soon as he gets done with his Iowa career, even during his Iowa career, because, he was a cadet bronze freestyle medalist. Eventually Cassiope's going to step in at 125. Do they need a 97 or a 92? Maybe that's where you go get somebody different, or maybe somebody eventually grows into that spot. Then you've got other guys like Jeremiah Moody sticking around. Pat Lugo's going to be there. He'll probably be at 70 in non-Olympic years. So that seems like the natural progression to me, in addition to, any of the guys that want to stick around. I thought Dan Dennis when I was thinking of potential candidates, he was not on my radar, I'll admit it. But when you think about when you look at his resume, it makes sense, right? Mm-hmm. He was an Olympian. He got to the finals of how many U.S. Opens once he came back from years off of the mat. 2-time All-American, got to the NCAA finals. He's a dude that he's got a tremendous personality. He's not afraid to just kind of let loose and have fun with it. But obviously the results show that when it's time to get serious, it's time to get serious. Dude's got a wicked gut wrench, so he's going to teach all those guys that. Mm-hmm. It seems like that's where they're headed, right? Like, that seems like what's coming down the pipe for the Hawkeye Wrestling Club. So, do they have to go and get a 97? Like, maybe that's what they do next. Like, do they go and try and recruit somebody else? I don't know. Like, that's, but it seems like all these guys that are going to eventually come off of the Iowa team this year are just going to be a natural, let's slide into the Hawkeye Wrestling Club for a cycle or two and see what happens.
And that, laying it out like that, I would make sense for your college wrestling fans that are just like in tune with these guys, right? On the international side of things, and in the whole RTC game of how that helps recruiting too. At first I was like, you got to have a big name and you got to go out and get a big, when you go in the Nittany Lion Wrestling Club, room? You're going to maybe go to Penn State?
I mean, they got a similar setup. I mean, look at who they've got up and down the line. You know, they'll have Gilman at 57. They'll have, looking specifically at Olympic weights, Zane at 65, DT at 86. Like, they've got the dudes.
Olympic team members.
Yeah.
Like the members.
World team members.
Yeah, world team, guys that will likely be on the Olympic team.
Yeah. Well, and I think the argument for Iowa is that, you know, the team that is eventually going to make up the Hawkeye Wrestling Club, all those names I just rattled off, those are the guys that brought Iowa back to the top.
Yep.
That's a hell of a recruiting pitch if you're Tom Brands, you know? And so they're going to, you know, eventually they're going to fill out the rest of their 2021 class, but, you know, they're going to be able to call the rising juniors on June 15th. Hey, here's what our future is going to look like, not just in the Iowa room, but in the Hawkeye Wrestling Club. Like, these are the guys you're going to get to train with. You're going to get to train with the guys that brought Iowa back. And we know how good the sophomores, soon to be juniors in the state of Iowa are. Would you turn that down?
If you're sitting down and you're talking to these guys on why they came to Iowa, and then they also take care of them after you graduate, makes sense.
Right? Like, that's, you know, hey, these guys brought it back, and they are going to stick around and not only chase their dreams, but ensure that Iowa stays there.
Yep. If they can, well, I guess they can't financially say, hey, yeah, you know, once you graduate, you can be here, but they can show, hey, when these guys leave, we take care of them.
Yeah.
You know, so whether that's a year or a whole cycle, you know, it's going to be dependent on probably the athlete. But that's a different perspective as far that I've looked at as far as team wise of who falls in. So that's refreshing. That's refreshing.
Yeah,
like that.
And there's, you know, guys like the Panther Wrestling Club. You know, they're RTC up at UNI. They're trying to do the same thing, because I know Lujan's going to try and stick around and wrestle for a little while. Drew Foster's still in the room. You know, that's going to help a guy like Keck Eisen. You know, I know Joey Laser's still up there. They roll around all the time. Is he?
Guy just left.
Oh,
like,
man, I love
like
that dude.
Just like Monday, coaching I think a high school program.
Good for him.
I'm not sure though. He's getting out of competitive. So
good for him.
Yeah,
though.
that's the first person I thought of too. Like, and then
you know, but then there's you know, Max Thompson. I don't know how often he'll be in the room, but you know, that's a guy that you can go wrestle with. You know, or at least bounce ideas off of. You know, at Iowa State, they've got Kyvan still there. You know, I know Willie is still probably going to want to wrestle a little bit. And we know David Carr and Austin Gomez have freestyle aspirations. As long, you know, Gannon Grumman was a Fargo champ. Like, they're setting themselves up as well, and they're bringing in some other guys that have successful, you know, freestyle credentials as well at the high school level. So, I mean, Iowa's kind of the model that a lot of other teams, not just in Iowa but around the country, are going to try and match, because, you know, look at the pitch, right? Like, yep. it works, you know?
Yeah, they might be able to get away with having to pay some of these athletes some of the money that some of them are getting, and just focus on, like, these guys that maybe they're not proven yet, so they're not, I guess, requiring a nice little contract. Like, hey, yeah, you proved yourself at the collegiate level, like, now come in, prove yourself at the international level. So that's a unique, I guess, at the end of the day, it's a business. The RTC is a business. These guys and women are.
That's their job.
It's their straight up job.
Yeah.
So when all this stuff was going around about them cutting the women's funding and stuff, I didn't look at it like that. Maybe it's just because I'm in here in Iowa, and I looked at it as, you know, a business decision, and why can't those women go to, you know, a strong collegiate women's program? Why can't they start an RTC and have them on? Why wouldn't you want them on, you know, on campus instead of like at a men's program? You know, that kind of doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me.
That whole thing was weird and fascinating to me at the same time. I don't know. Where do we start on that?
Another podcast. Yeah. I'd love to have you back on again. Maybe we need to have you on Hager's Happy Hour, where we have a couple of beers and we can maybe dive into that. But all right, I appreciate you coming on. Everything going on and spending time in here in Des Moines, Iowa, and everything that you're trying to do that they let you do. So hopefully we play ball. We are starting IA baseball, actually. So there's know the people that you're used to. Eric Scherr is going to be coming over, and he's going to be doing some 1A, 2A rankings. So
all the wrestlers in 1A, 2A play baseball too. So
exactly.
He probably knows all those guys anyway.
Exactly. So be on the lookout at IABaseball.com. we're gonna try to do exactly what we do with the wrestling, but there's a lot of great rankings out there already in the baseball world, and so we're gonna be trying to do a little unique. We're gonna have individual rankings, so we're gonna have the top 5 first basemen in Class 1A, 2A, 3A, 4A.
That is ambitious.
So it will be interesting. There's what's great about baseball is.
You guys going to construct like WAR stats for all these guys? Like, what's their wins above replacement compared to other kids at their position?
What's nice about there's quick stats, right? In baseball,
yeah, they do.
And there's nothing like that really in wrestling, to an extent. Like it's a little bit harder with track wrestling.
You know how to work track
wrestling, but like quick stats is like I don't know. They rank them, and I don't know. Baseball is going to be interesting. I think if the individual rankings. But like, how do you grade? Okay, like got a first baseman, really good infielder, maybe not the best batter, but he I don't know, but he gets a couple home runs. He strikes out a lot, but he gets a lot of home. I don't know. There's so many different ways that you could look at ranking these dudes. And what's really hard with 1A, 2A is you got a pitcher that's also a shortstop, and sometimes he catches. So it'll be interesting to see how this goes. But all right, let's wrap it up. Cody Goodwin of Des Moines Register, thank you again for coming on the show.
No, man, thanks for having me. I'm always down to talk some wrestling, and hopefully we have a Fargo tournament to look forward to in July, and hopefully some baseball to watch before then.
What's your social media so people can follow you if they don't?
At Cody Goodwin, CodyGoodwin.
And Cody's also got his own podcast too. What's the podcast?
It's called In the Room,
okay.
Wrestling podcast from the Des Moines Register. That's literally the tagline if anybody has ever listened to it.
In the Room is available on podcast friendly apps.
So we do Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Spotify. And I've told people on my podcast, and I'm going to use yours to blast it out again. If you listen to a podcast that's not any of those 4, or you listen to your podcast on a different streaming service, let your boy know so that I can try and get In the Room on that streaming service so that people can listen to it, because I've been trying to do it weekly, and like you, it's kind of been hit and miss. Sometimes I get interviews, sometimes like I'm doing a mailbag podcast this week. So I'm actually probably going to record that either later tonight or first thing tomorrow morning. So it's been a little tricky without the access to coaches and athletes, but we've been making it work.
Well, Spotify, Joe Rogan is moving to Spotify. Their stock went up $1 billion. So I'm guessing
the Room was on Spotify before Joe Rogan.
Yeah,
so I need your listens, guys.
No big deal. No big deal. He was on Spotify before it was cool with the Rogan. So all right. So our podcast here, Potentially Dangerous, always going to be available on Rokfin. The video portion of it will live there on Rokfin. It's also on Facebook.
Y'all can check out my new specs.
You can, I liked it. I like them. He's got glasses now. So
and really long hair because Kim shut down.
You've always got long hair.
Long hair. But I cut it during wrestling season because it's way too much to deal with.
You did cut it. So keep her clean now that barbers are back open. All right. So Potentially Dangerous, all your podcast-friendly apps. Video lives on Rokfin on Facebook. And on Fridays, you can catch me for Hager's Happy Hour for not the same type of show. We're going to have a couple beers, talk wrestling. This Friday, I've got 4-time undefeated state champion Jeff McGinnis, 2-time national champion for Iowa. He was the 4th high school wrestler to go undefeated. So really pumped to have Jeff on here, talk Iowa wrestling. He's also, we're going to talk a little wrestling, but he's a business person as well. If you've been to wine styles, you've been to beer styles, Jeff McGinnis is behind that. So if you're out looking to maybe have a couple beers here now things are open, pop your head into beer styles out in West Des Moines. And Jeff's in there every once in a while. They've got a great beer list. Check that out. But you can hear more about that this Friday on Hager's Happy Hour. So thanks for watching Potentially Dangerous.
Get low when the whistle goes.